Hey, what I miss? We're one the same. Draft Ronin Derple Me here for another episode of what I've decided to call this mini-series, Rational Saurographic, where I showcase just about everything I had made for my Saurosapiens Acts 1 and 2, 3, and 4 series, based on C.M. Kosemen's All Tomorrows, that either wasn't fully explored, expanded on, or even appeared at all, as well as explaining my own creative process and decisions, while also retconning certain plot elements for any future All Tomorrows SPORE content. Today, we're going to go all the way back 23 million years to Act 1. Oh, wait a second. Saurostralian set 3, so I guess I didn't delete it after all, which... Oh my god, I'm so stupid. Alright, so, much like last episode, by the time this episode goes live, the Saurostralian sets 1 and 3 will be up and available to download on Sporepedia, provided you have the mods listed in its description installed properly to load it. But, with that said, let's skip back to our first dryland terse formation set. And here we are. Alright, that's enough of that. Let's just go get into the creatures here. One of the first things you may have noticed is that we have a few different lizards in this herd, starting with the basic lizard stock. Now, here in the editor, you'll notice that this particular model has a set of invisible limbs attached to it. Why is that, you may wonder? Movement. Having an extra set of invisible limbs changes the gait of how our creature moves. If we remove these invisible limbs, his torso is much more bouncy and jumpy looking. While with an additional pair of legs, the torso is smoother, albeit more rubbery looking as the creature walks. This is actually the first draft model of the lizard livestock I made, back when I was still going for a more canonically accurate visual style. However, something about it just doesn't feel accurate enough, which at first was frustrating, but looking back on it, probably was for the better, as ultimately this particular model is kind of both accurate to this original C.M. Kosemen artwork, and also more of my own style too. Coloration-wise, it also works with different shades of green accented with yellow, but remember when I said how I wasn't satisfied with how the first one came out? Well, then I tried again, hoping to make an even more accurate herd lizard, resulting in... This is what happens when I try too hard to make something look like the original, that it ends up looking nothing like the original. A bit taller, different head, eyes and feet, and scale pattern. About the only thing carried over from the previous model are the little neck spikes and coloration. But, you know, it still kinda works. I like to think that this particular herd lizard is descended from chameleons, and despite being listed as a carnivore over there on the right here, isn't a picky eater. He'll eat bones, fungi, gourds, etc. in a relatively mild manner, thus allowing them to be easily tamed and flock with other distantly related breeds of lizard stock. And, naturally, both these breeds have their own slight color variations, shown here. Okay, time for the thing you probably all came here to see, the lizard herder. Now, believe it or not, this isn't the first draft model I made of the lizard herder. Shocking, I know. but unfortunately I am almost 100% certain that the actual first version has been deleted for good. However, and I'll go more into this in depth in the next episode, the first draft model did make a very brief appearance in Act 2, sorta. Anyways, Lizard Herder. As far as post-humans go, the Lizard Herders were one of the few that weren't all that physically changed by the Q. So, naturally, I set out to make a human, and I got a human. Human beings have never really looked good in SPORE, in my opinion. And this particular post-human isn't really all that much better. However, this second draft model is the more passable of the two that I made, being a tad more cartoonish, thus relieving a few fleeting points off of the Uncanny Valley scale. His eyes have little going on behind them. The hair on his head kind of reminds me of Subaru Natsuki's from ReZero, strangely enough. And his nose isn't actually all that dissimilar to my own nose in terms of shape and size. And he's got some big old hobbit feet. All in all, I think I did a good enough job on it. It might have been nice to have a more lizard herder individuals, but having one sufficed. Alright, let's move on to some of the other reptilian fauna that lived alongside the lizard herders and their livestock. Starting with one of my more personal favorite creatures here, known simply as frills. Frills, being the pack-hunting predators of the lizard stock, are largely based on the Dilophosaurus from the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World series. Yes, I know. The Dilophosaurus are not scientifically accurate to the actual real dinosaur. However, I'll admit, I've always had a soft spot for that inaccurate, frill-sprouting, venom-spitting version. And I wanted to have a creature that was pretty much the Dilo in spirit. Anyways, frills, fast-moving predators, armed with sharp claws and a venomous bite, also capable of spitting venom from short distances. Their signature frills are used for threat displays, thermal regulation, and possibly other purposes too. They aren't exactly retractable, but I guess that's just from game engine limitations. As for their phylogeny, I imagine them to be the descendants not of frilled lizards, but instead monitor lizards or possibly water basilisks, given their back legs are split out. You know what, let's go with water basilisks instead. And then we have the Terror Tortoise. Huge, Titanic-sized descendants of modern-day tortoises. Much like the Tauretons from The Future is Wild, the Terror Tortoise is an apex omnivore, typically found browsing treetops with its elongated neck, but will occasionally snap up smaller animals that wander within its reach, as well as feeding off those that's already trampled underfoot, such as lizard stock and herders alike. Despite their imposing stature, terror tortoises generally dislike conflict and can readily be chased off given enough effort. And with that, let's go back to the lizard livestock herd and take a look at our last creature for today. Among all the different breeds of lizard stock, and each of those breeds' own variations, there is one particular species that is probably the most important to our story overall. That being Rex. Now, at first glance, Rex doesn't seem all that different from the previously shown lizard stock, which is true. That particular version served as the basis for Rex's build. That said, however, Rex's model lacks the invisible set of limbs, meaning he moves a bit differently. His back feet are also different from the previous lizard stock whom he was based off of, which, when paired with his front feet having a semi-opposable digit, might allow for a degree of manipulation down the road. Rex, along with the rest of his particular breed, largely serve the same role as a border collie, which themselves are one of the smartest breeds of dog, aiding their master in keeping the flock safe and together. At the time of Act 1, Rex himself is probably about as intelligent as his lizard herder companion, if not a bit more. Let's be honest, a lot bit more. The name Rex might not even be his own particular name, as I imagined it might be sort of a placeholder name that our lizard herders family has called each of their lizard collies for generations. But for Rex and his kind, the name holds a different meaning. You see, Rex's particular kind is capable of mimicking and vocalizing certain words they hear often. A new generation is born, and a newly hatched nestling is greeted by its parents, older siblings, aunts and uncles. Its mother chirps out to her young, "Rex, Rex, Rex, Rex," not knowing the full meaning of what the word itself means, but understanding that there's a context and emotion from which it's used. As the nestling grows and matures, they too will eventually start their own family, repeating the same sound to its offspring. Rex, Rex. It is a word, a name, that is repeated down to each new generation. In our modern English language, the term Rex is derived from the Latin word of the same name, meaning king. However, for these lizards and their descendants, it has a different meaning altogether. Just not one that can be easily put into words alone. As the millennia pass, the lush, rolling valley that the lizard and herders called home began to dry. Weather patterns shifted as their climate continued to change. Eventually, many of the large reptile megafauna of the region would go extinct. First, the terror tortoises, whom were a keystone species in their environment, followed by several other unnamed clades. Lizard herds, along with their now more animalistic post-human companions, migrated to far-off lands, some splitting off from the group to form their own mixed herds. Those herds that rejected their post-human companions fared poorly in their changing world compared to those who kept them around, utilizing their brutish strength for protection, hairy bodies for warmth, and meat for sustenance. Eventually, the last of the frilled predators would go extinct, leaving open a niche for small, pack-hunting predators. But perhaps that's a story for a future video. And with that, we've pretty well covered everything here for this set. Next time, we're returning to 23 million years in the future, and explore a few minor plot threads that were only very, very briefly alluded to before even further into the future, another 230 years. So, until then, stay woke.